Welcome to SEL and EDU, the podcast where we explore how educators bring social emotional learning to life by sharing stories, strategies, and sparks of inspiration. I'm your host, Dr. Krista Lay, owner of Resonance Education. Thank you for joining us on this SEL journey.
Hi, I'm Chris Nesi from the House of EdTech Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Niko Tsamatoulidis is a first-generation Greek-American, a proud husband of 29 years and father of 3. With degrees from Westchester, Lehigh, and Moravian universities, he has spent 33 years educating and coaching youth, including 28 years as a K-12 educator and 20 as an administrator. He co-led Liberty High School's transformation into a trauma-informed school with a pioneering wellness center. Currently, he serves as the administrator of student supports and wellness for Bethlehem Area School District, is an ICF ACC certified coach, an educational consultant, an adjunct faculty member, and Chief Hope Officer of Hope Does, LLC. Welcome back, SEL and EDU family. And speaking of welcoming you back, I am very fortunate to have an opportunity to welcome back a dear friend and colleague, Niko Tsamatoulidis. And this could not have come at a better time, this topic. Those of you who are listening, I have to share that I got a text from a friend who said that their school board is changing the terms trauma-informed practices to sensitivity to student experiences, which I get, and that is what we're doing. But this idea of changing things and eliminating things, and then the idea of restorative practices being called accountability practices, which they are, but what's wrong with those initial words? And I do have to say that in talking to people who have said to me before, why don't we use this word or that word anymore? It's because it hurts people's feelings. I'm curious how these words, trauma-informed practices and sensitivity to student experiences, hurts people's feelings. I really want to know, because I think there's a difference between not using a word because it hurts somebody's feelings, because I don't think you want to hurt somebody's feelings. I don't think we should be throwing around language that's hurtful. And our topic today is on hope. I have to tell you that I just saw an article where they're wiping out historical photos from archives. So they're looking for anything that says gender or gay. And so the Enola Gay came up, and the Enola Gay was the plane that dropped the atomic bomb. And it was named after the guy's mom. There's a whole debate around the dropping of the atomic bombs, but we're just doing this blanket getting rid of, and they're not allowed to talk about the Tuskegee Airmen, and they're taking away images of brave men and women who have fought for our country. I'm just afraid if they do this blanket, get rid of everything without actually looking at things and understanding the context, we're really going to be losing significant portions of our history that hold meaning for so many people. And so now that I'm off my soapbox, our session is on hope, and I need this right now. Niko has been researching hope and working in schools with educators and students around hope. So Niko, thank you for listening to me. I know we've talked about this on a regular basis, but thank you for being back here, and please fill my bucket this morning.
Thank you so much for inviting me again, and it's always a pleasure to connect with you, to communicate with you. I was tracking everything you were saying, so it's always awesome to be able to just sit together in a space where we just get to go back and forth and communicate. And really through friendship and connection, that is how we elevate hope within one another, because it's a social gift that we give to each other. And so that is awesome. Then our journey in humanity, right? Sometimes I'm down and you're up, and vice versa. And just being with someone who just might be in a better state, a better place on this specific day, just spending time with that individual, we end up connecting deep into the level of brain-based science. We have that incredible effect on one another, for good or bad, all depending on how we show up and how we view the other person, especially in the unspoken. In that sense, we have this incredible power within ourselves that sometimes we forget and is incumbent upon us. At least I believe that with all the stuff swirling around today, that there may not be much that we can change on a grand level from a circumstance and condition standpoint. But what we can have influence on is how we interact with other people, what we say and how we say it. That's just sounds simple, but it's super powerful and exciting stuff.
Yeah. And two things are making me chuckle right now. One is we talked for 2 hours yesterday about other stuff. So that reminder of that hope happens in social contexts. It's not something that we can do all by ourselves is just a really good reminder for me. I think that keeping in mind who you're surrounded by and the type of energy they're bringing to you is super important. So even days when I just need to unload real quick in 2 minutes, like I just dumped all that onto you and you're still smiling and I know I'm going to be smiling, but I just needed to get that out and then be like, okay, give me some hope. Let's talk about hope. I'm actually curious because I don't know that we've talked about this in a long time, but where did you start getting the idea that hope is where you wanted to focus in on?
Wow, that's a really great question. You're right. We never really talked about this, even offline conversation. So this is super cool. I think it's a combination of two things for me, maybe three. And so the first part is that just really my experiences working with folks during and post COVID and recognizing that even in a loving home, in a home where we are pretty open and vulnerable, which is one of the ways to elevate hope. You have a safe space where you can pretty much let your hair down and just talk about things. Even in that space that I saw how differently the pandemic and all the closures were affecting my kids differently, it got me thinking to what about the individuals and kids who don't have somebody to turn to? It's not a safe space that you can really download what's between your ears. I think that really was eye-opening to me. We came back and then the kids came back. That really started building this fire in me. At the same time, one of the many different hats that I wear, also part of a faith-based community, myself and another group of individuals, we literally planted a church and we meet at the high school where I used to work at on Sundays. I know from my faith-based lens who hope is and the hope that lives in me. At the same time, I know in the marketplace that not everybody shares that belief that I have. So for me, knowing that this is part of my DNA, and at the same time, knowing I want to message it in a way that isn't me imposing my beliefs on anyone else and seeing just really the circumstances and conditions around us. For me, low levels of hope are when I would see individuals just really flatline, just very neutral. In the hope continuum, that's despair. I'm not in a state of apathy just yet, but I'm moving towards that place. And I'm just neutral. I'm not positive. I'm not negative. They called it the post-COVID numbing. And I still see that today. All that really built a fire to me. And you and I have talked about this before, Krista, about we're doers. We get stuff done, especially in the realm of education. But how many times do we take a step back and know all this doing comes from a source, and that source comes from our being? Why don't we ever take a moment? It's not this fluffy, wimpy stuff, but why don't we ever take a moment and focus on the being? And so for me, it's something that resonates with individuals. Who could say that I'm hopeful 29 out of 30 days in a month or 30 out of 31? I recognized in our line of work, and then in greater society, when I would just study folks and just see that pizzazz, that spunk, that positivity, and no one was inherently being negative. But what I also recognized in my last few years of observing classrooms and evaluating teachers is that there was a state of neutrality. So, okay, that's giving me some signals and signs. I really want to start digging into the science of hope, which when you live in a multicultural, pluralistic society, you can talk about that. Go back to what I said earlier, whatever your faith is, or maybe not, but let's for a moment camp at faith-based individuals, regardless of what the major faiths are. When you look at the science of hope, it definitely would resonate with whatever your specific, if you want to call it holy book or holy scripture, it fits right in. I've had family members who perhaps want to just dig into the science, And perhaps they're atheists or agnostics, it still resonates. It all fits. It's just a beautiful thing. We're living in some interesting times as the unpredictable continues to rise. And the research and science shows how many people feel lonely. This is a perfect segue into just really infusing some oxygen into people's souls.
We've talked a lot about the faith piece before because I'm somebody, and I've never said this on the podcast, who has practiced several different faiths and still finds myself searching. I believe very deeply that we're all connected and that there's something bigger. I'm not sure what that is. You mentioned having a who is hope, but you also mentioned what is hope. And that's what I'm thinking you're talking about, the science piece. And so for those who might be atheist or agnostic or spiritual on this journey, what is hope?
Great question. So purely from a scientific standpoint, when we unpack this, hope isn't a feeling, it's an action and it's a verb. The beautiful thing about hope is that it's a social gift that happens in relationships and connection with others and never, ever in isolation. We're social beings. Hope begets hope. The beautiful thing about the science of hope, that imagination is an instrument of hope, the ability to futurecast, forward thinking, that even if right now in the here and now, it's not so good, but the ability to know that this too shall pass. Imagination is an instrument of hope, which is why teaching kids to dream and set goals is so critical. For us as adults, we had certain goals. We dreamed certain things. Why are we right now in the place that we're at in this current juncture? Are we still doing that? And if not, why not? What are some things that we can start dreaming about and goal setting about? That is so exciting because I've never met a parent, I've never met a teacher, a human that said, no, I'm good. I'm resilient enough. So if we're really about being more resilient, if we're really about passing resiliency to our personal children, if we're really about passing on resiliency to our students, if we're about that, then hope precedes resiliency. If we can elevate people's hope levels, we elevate their resiliency, their ability to endure, persevere, bounce back. If you're more resilient, if you're more hopeful, then you're even healthier. So higher levels of hope, higher levels of resiliency, then as a human, you're healthier. Let's specifically talk about kids for a moment and teens. When that happens, then increased hope levels improves their attendance, their grades, GPA, their grade level, promotion or high school graduation rates, and college or post-secondary or employment going rates. It drives us to practice habits that enhance whatever it is we're looking to go after. So that's really awesome and exciting.
The part that I really want to hold on to there is practice habits, because knowing what we know about brain science, especially for our youth, is that you mentioned future casting. And so that's part of and feel free to correct me, because I know with your counseling and psychology background that it's your prefrontal cortex that helps with the future casting and being able to see ahead and see natural logical consequences and to actually see your future. That doesn't fully get developed until now they're saying 26, but that doesn't mean that we can't practice on working towards there. So just saying to somebody like, it's going to get better. I know that's a start. Okay, you're telling somebody, but if they're not feeling it or seeing that path, there's more that needs to happen with our youth. I've heard you talk about waypower and willpower and this idea of agency. And when we actually break it down and help our students have not only the feeling of hope, but the pathway to that. Could you talk more about what that looks like in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. Earlier, you heard me say that it's a social gift that happens in relationships, right? And connection and not in isolation. So really just the power of those relationships and how someone shows up. I talk a lot about waypower and willpower. In academia, we talk about agency. For me, that's nothing more than really talking about mental and emotional endurance. I refer to that as willpower. A lot of times when we're under duress on a long stretch of adversity or trauma, that diminishes in us greatly. It's incredibly important to be able to have someone in our life, one or more, as I call transition people, that are there for us, this person they can turn to and they can cheer them on and be there to encourage them. They have that freedom and space and trust to be able to also just challenge them to go after whatever it is that they're doing. And so the three levels are, like you just mentioned before, Krista, is goal setting. So what are some things that you want to go after, and being able to measure and track. Agency, which, as I mentioned, is that willpower. The pathways is knowing that thing I want to go after. What are the different ways I can get there? There's multiple ways to get there. And if that isn't a strength in me yet, or perhaps I'm low in just knowing, I don't know how many ways to get there. And also, I don't anticipate when a roadblock or an obstacle comes in the way, how do I readjust? And frequently I think about the Waze app. When I'm driving 6 hours to go see my kids in Virginia, the satellites are helping the app on my phone, and they're telling me if I need to reroute, go a different way, depending on an accident, traffic, etc., to still try to get me in that reasonable amount of time that it initially predicted I was going to get to Virginia. And so connecting, surrounding yourself with people, or at least one person that can encourage and support you, a person who can help you think strategically with the waypower, aka pathways, to overcome those obstacles and really help you in achieving your goals, and anticipate, you know what, I thought at the moment that goal made sense, but now not so much, and I still want to stay to it, but modify it. Having that person who's a good strategic thinker to help you carve out, how do we re-goal? And measure this. I've gone around in schools and we've measured it in staff. Right now, the focus phase 1 is on staff, but ultimately down the road, I'd love for them to be able to unpack this with kids and have individuals see, I want to know the hope levels in my classroom. What are my kids' hope scores? Parents doing it with their own personal kids. And the beautiful thing about this is, let's just say you don't like your hope score. Let's just say it's low in your mind. Here's the awesome thing. You can always elevate it, but the key to elevating it is being connected with someone. And so at a time where we see a lot of brokenness or challenges that are splitting in our society and community, this fosters a way to really bridge community in schools and other spaces in society and workplaces. It's definitely makes you think, I really want this. I want to go after it. I want to elevate my hope levels. And part of this is, how can I connect with someone else or others to do that?
Everything that you've shared here around hope directly aligns to research from the Search Institute around developmental relationships. They interviewed and collected data from millions of students on what they need from trusted adults in their lives. It talked about that we need somebody who can challenge us and stretch us, but also support us along the way. And the last piece of that was somebody who will invest in me and help me see a pathway that I didn't know of before. We all have blind spots. There's pieces that we don't know until we know. So what role can adults play in students' lives to help them see pathways that, whether it's because of experience or brain development? I like how you also said accountability partner. And I don't think of that as a bad thing. I think of that as somebody who, it doesn't mean you're always going to be successful, but that's somebody who, like you said, is going to walk along with you. In the research around the developmental relationships, they interviewed students and they said they don't like the term mentor because in their minds, it's somebody who has to be with them, who is paid to be with them, not necessarily somebody who is there authentically. When you have an accountability partner, that's a social pact that you're making to check in with somebody. That's quite powerful. In the work that I do, working with staff on how to support students, we talk about that. But I know that at the level you're at, district-wide, you're working with staff. And I know there's a slide that you have at the end of your piece, and I see you smiling already. This is one of those times when I'm like, oh man, I wish we were doing video. But when we think about increasing hope levels among staff, and you talk about there being accountability partners and social pieces, can you speak to that slide in particular, because that is really going to resonate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. You almost build it into a mental crescendo, if you will, to try to get folks to really be like, oh, I'm tracking this. Some of the parts that I know, it's just human behavior, human nature. I embed things without them knowing about. I like that acronym I learned in graduate studies with WIFM, what's in it for me. I'm going to get to that slide in a moment, but when I bring up the Netflix documentary, Live to 100, right? One of those 5 blue zones are where my father's family was from. Half of my family's from there. People can focus on the climate and they can focus on the nutrition. And yes, that's all real. But really, when you dig down deep, why do these individuals forget to die? They routinely live over 100. They don't have any recorded cases or extremely low of neurological disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia. Number one, all these places have a faith in something bigger and beyond themselves. Number two, their social bonds and relationships are so strong. Now, I couple it with the loneliness rate in America is up to pandemic levels. People are reporting through the Gallup Research Center and through Harvard Business Journal that folks are lonely. 1 out of every 5 Americans are reporting that. I go about my duties, I do my job, I do my duties at home, but internally inside, I feel lonely. I would say in every space I've been in when I'm doing faculty staff trainings, there are people in there that are like, he's speaking to me. That's exactly how I feel. And so even though it's important, I was a free lunch kid as an immigrant coming to this country. We have been really educated on socioeconomic status. Absolutely. But that's not the only source of poverty, of being hungry, of being perhaps homeless, of food and house insecurity. I get that. That's real. But we forget sometimes the poverty that's around us, of staff members, of colleagues, of friends, of students, of families who feel unwanted, unloved, uncared for, isolated, and lonely. And quite frankly, that's a poverty of the soul. People can make the argument that's even more excruciating, perhaps, than some of the tangible things we need. That's debatable, but that's also just as real. So we build up to this. We talk about how it's working in places and what's the reality in our society, in our communities today. Then I bring them to the slide, which is an incredible quote from Christopher Emdin. And the quote is, the kind of teacher you'll become is directly related to the kind of teachers you associate with. That teaching is a profession where misery does more than just love company. It recruits, seduces, and romances it. Avoid people who are unhappy and disgruntled about the possibilities for transforming education. They are the enemy of the spirit of the teacher. I can sum that up with negative people. If you're consistently showing up in a negative state, I always make people laugh. If you show up as Mr. or Mrs. Cranky Pants frequently, you attack and neutralize hope. And that's not good for your health or the health of the people that are around you. So we have them. I know them. We have family members like that. Hey, I love you, but I have to love you from a distance. I can't spend much time with you because micro neurons and co-regulation are super real. It's one thing, Krista, if I'm like, all right, I'm either venting or, okay, now I need to wrestle through this. I'm looking for some solutions. That's okay. But if I'm always coming and talking about how my job stinks, this is going on, all that, if I'm spending like more than 5 minutes with you and I'm in that state, you start co-regulating with me unless you excuse yourself. Mirror neurons in our brains activate and we start mirroring one another, which is so powerful. When we are in a regulated state, we can guide a kid or someone else with just enough support by how we show up, our presence, to help them manage their emotional state. We can easily say, I love this person or I love my coworker, but truly, if my disposition and my countenance frequently is not a positive state, I'm neutralizing and diminishing hope levels in you. I'm having a direct impact on you, and it's not good for anybody's health. It leads to inflammation, which then eventually leads to the diseasing process. That's some fascinating stuff to really consider and know, if I really care about you and I really love you, what am I doing to consistently show up in a way that's encouraging, inspiring, and hopeful? And at the very least, not negative or neutral.
We've had conversations, and every time we talk, I have new ahas and new And it's wanting to not push away the people who are negative, but there's a balance there too with your own boundaries, your own health and well-being. That leads me to being able to have courageous conversations with people that you're around, saying, here's what I'm seeing and hearing, specific descriptive information. This isn't healthy. I care about you. I want you to be well. And here's what I'm noticing. And I want me to be well. And here's the patterns that I'm seeing. How close are you to this person? Is this person somebody that you do need to step away from for a bit, or somebody that you care about deeply and you want to have that courageous conversation? And it leads me to think about the differences between empathy and compassion, where empathy is in the feelings, but compassion is action. The piece that comes back to me again about hope is that it is feeling, but it's action at the same time.
Absolutely.
I didn't know all of this until talking and continuing to learn from you.
Yeah. And I really love the way you've always explained that. I've learned from you the compassion piece, right? The action, just that simple definition. I had a different definition, but I really like yours. Yours really makes sense. It's putting hands and feet to it, because empathy is a good place. The science shows that when there's empathy between individuals, that doesn't mean I agree with you, but I understand you and I view you with value and worth and belonging. That changes even our neurophysiological states. Empathy really has the potential and the opportunity to heal and save lives, because it really has such a state where it at the moment can pause someone's cortisol and adrenaline of being in that fight, flight, freeze mechanism that's always on the hamster wheel for some people because of their challenging, traumatic event or current events that's still happening. And we have such incredible opportunity with how we show up to push that back and really help people with chemicals like oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine, just of our presence. That's important for educators to remember. It really puts you on the hook to think about every interaction matters and every interaction counts. And if I get it wrong, let's go back and fix it. You said something really important before that. You're right. You don't want to shun someone, but do you have the relationship with them to take that risk in that relationship and say, hey, I care about you. Are you okay? Because I've noticed some things and I know that's not what you're about. I've had to meet with teachers and have those conversations and say, hey, I don't think you want to be known, because the kids are struggling right now with approaching you. They're telling us you're not approachable. So I don't think you want to be known as someone who's negative or unapproachable, do you? And I've never had someone say, oh, no, absolutely. I like that. That noticing is taking a risk. We don't control how the person responds back to us. But if you really care about the welfare and being of someone, even those individuals who are consistently, or you see them in a streak of negativity, it's incumbent upon us to have that peaceful, courageous conversation and take that risk. Because if no one says anything, then do you really care about them? And you allow them to be in that state. And look, in our plight of humanity, I can speak for myself. How many times have we all sometimes haven't struggled through that stretch or that season to have someone who loves us and cares about us to say, hey, are you okay? Because you've been a little negative, or things that have been coming out of your mouth have been not so positive, productive, or solution oriented. That's a good thing, which takes us full circle right back to who's your people? Do you have that real community? Or do we have these fake relationships that are just a sea of casual relationships versus I have some people that I trust and I know they love me. And I've also, in humility, opened the door that they can speak into my life and not just sugar, spice, and everything nice. Do we have that relational grit that when they tell us that, no, they're not trying to control us, they care about us? That's the whole big push when we talk about everything we've talked about with hope. That's really the deal. It's going back to relational grit. It's going back to these spaces of people, because everything's about the with. If you want to elevate your hope levels, you got to be in it with someone, not by yourself. And it pushes back against the isolationism, the findings that people are saying. One of the findings is people believe we live in a society that's too individualistic. We're creative and resourceful. Let's push back against that. create your people. Everything is just intertwined and entangled in a beautiful way.
On a national level, for schools who are also thinking about how do we make these shifts to support students, increase hope levels for them and for our staff at the same time. And so if people are listening to this and they want to reach out to you and to hear more, to connect more, what are the best ways for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. Email, cell phone number. I'm open to either or, just to connect and communicate, because I think one of the greatest gifts, I keep saying about how we show up, but one of the greatest gifts that we can give each other. You started this podcast and saying, hey, I need some hope. And having a regulated nervous system, right? It's one that is flexible and resilient. And we can train our nervous system to become more flexible. And that lets us move through life in a calmer state, which you mentioned earlier is we want to live in our prefrontal cortex. And many are living in their amygdala brain. This is something that can be taught. This is something that you can slowly bring about and have it a comprehensive and a systematic way of a school of wellness. I would be willing to communicate and speak with anyone, because this is definitely the way if we're really about having more resilient leaders, more resilient staff, more resilient kids, and a more resilient future for others. My cell phone number is 610-360-4898. My email, it's very long because of my wonderfully long Greek last name. It is the letter N and then T, S-A, M as in Mary, O-U, T as in Tom, A, L as in Larry, I, D as in David, I-S, at basdschools.org.
The last question I have for you is that we have a musical theme through this. And I know that through our conversations, we often talk about music and how music is very important for self-care and for helping us. Sometimes it gives us hope. So what is on your playlist right now? What have you been listening to? A song, a group, a genre? What gives you hope?
I always need music that touch and pierce my soul, so I can continue to just almost have just a soft area there and remember. It almost takes me back to something I have pasted on my laptop as a reminder. What do I want to be remembered for? So I need to be put in that state. I'm listening to a group called Family Music. Their specific album is called Undignified. So it's faith-based, specifically worship music, hope, the future casting, the goal setting, the ability to do that. Even though many of us don't like transition and change, the two songs I keep having on my playlist by Family Music is New Beginnings and New Thing, because that's happening all the time to us. And isn't that really happening to us if we have a teachable, coachable attitude? We're constantly evolving. You said earlier, Krista, you're on this spiritual journey. And isn't that unfolding for us in many different ways, whether it's personal, whether it's professional? Like we're constantly, if we're allowing ourselves and we really deeply care about people, we're putting ourselves in states and positions through relationships and through education to be involved in a new beginning, to be involved in a new thing.
And it's uncomfortable and it's a stretch, but it's so worth it. And so having music, something that can help reinforce that, and because they wrote the song, you know that you're not going through it alone.
With strong relational bonds, the sky is the limit. And it takes some risk. And some of that from just do not remember the former things of old, because being in self-protective and preservation mode is natural after being hurt, but just keep throwing your hat in the ring, keep moving forward and pressing forward, and having other people in your circle is what makes all the difference in the world. The Marlboro Man is a myth.
Thank you for being in my circle.
Right back at you. I really appreciate you. You are definitely a transition person for so many people that even though sometimes the circumstances and conditions swirling around us can be like, I'm not sure if I like that, but you continue to keep on keeping on, and you do incredible work you are dealing hope every day. You are a hope dealer.
Thank you, my friend. And that is why we reflect great off of each other, because I know this is true about you. And as an introvert, it is hard to open up and to start that conversation. So the fact that two introverts connected pretty quickly says a lot. So I can't wait for the listening audience to hear this and to reach out to you and to continue hearing more about hope, because I know there's so much more to come. And so I have a feeling you're going to be back again. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise and your heart.
Thank you, Krista, as well, for not only what you do, but more importantly, for who you are.
Thank you again for tuning in to this episode of SEL in EDU. At Resonance Education, we equip educators with knowledge, skills, and resources to design learning experiences that foster students' academic, social, and emotional growth. We believe that every small action to foster connections and growth creates ripples shaping the future.